Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. So for this one we're going to head back to Brewdog and we're going to continue on with the Unleash the Yeast 2013 series. This is my second review out of the 4 beers in this series, and so this beer we're going to have a look at today is the Bavarian Weizen, a style of beer incidentally that I actually really like, so I'm quite looking forward to this beer. So as is usual then with my beer reviews, I will just take you through a very short history of the Brewdog Brewery before we go on to the tasting. As always, if you are simply interested in the tasting, just fast forward a few minutes into the video and you will catch that. The brewery website's in the video description for you below if you want to check that out, and as always the link to my other Brewdog beer reviews is there too. I think I've done about 30 or so of these now, so check them out if you are interested, and there will be more Brewdog reviews to come, so subscribe to the channel if you are interested in that. So anyway, the Brewdog Brewery was founded back in 2007 by two guys, James Watt and Martin Dickey, and their first brewery was at the Keswick Industrial Estate in Fraserburgh in the very northeast corner of Scotland. A few years down the line, I believe it was 2012, they relocated to Ellon in Aberdeenshire in their brand new purpose-built facility. A really awesome facility that they have there actually. But Brewdog are largely regarded as the sort of flag carriers of Scottish craft brewing these days. These beers you can find all over the world, all throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South America, South Africa and things like that. They're all over the place these days. They've grown very quickly in the last 7 years, but they're a very experimental brewery. Pretty much any beer, any style of beer if you like that you can think of, these guys will have done it at some point in their history. So, you know, any type of beer you can think of, you will be able to try it with these guys. The only downside really to the Brewdog Brewery is that they brew so many different good beers, but some of these things you will only see once, which is unfortunate because they do some top-notch stuff. And they're also famous for their strong beers as well. The Tokyo Star Imperial Stout, which is in their core range of beers actually, and they also have brewed like a few different ones, and they've actually held the title of World's Strongest Beer on 3 occasions as well, with the Tactical Nuclear Penguin, the Sink the Bismarck, and also the End of History as well. But these days they're actually more concentrating on expanding their brew pubs. They've got a hell of a lot of these all over England, and the first 3 that they opened up in Scotland as well, so they're expanding all over the place with that now. They also have 2 bars in Sweden, in Stockholm and Gothenburg I believe. They also have one down in Firenze in Italy, and their most recent ones I believe are actually out in Tokyo in Japan and Sao Paulo in Brazil, and there apparently will be ones opening up in Berlin, Paris and Brussels as well in the near future, and they will be expanding out to America, Canada and Australia in the next little while as well. And they actually just opened up their first bottle shop as well in London, where they obviously import a lot of beers and distribute them in the UK and things like that. So they've opened up a bottle shop in London called Brewdog. So if you're in London, go and check that out. But they're talking about expanding that business as well. So a lot of exciting things to come from Brewdog, and you can actually buy into this brewery through the Equity for Punks shareholding program if you like. And what you do there is you can choose how much you want to invest in the company in exchange for discount in the online shop and in the bars as well I believe. So it's a really cool scheme, and they actually used that to fund the building of their new purpose-built facility in Ellon, which is actually closer to the city of Aberdeen, about 20 miles or so north, and there will be a visitor centre opening up there soon, so go and check that out if you are interested in that. But let's actually get on to this beer itself now. The Unleash the Yeast series is essentially the same. It's the same kind of idea, if you like, as the IPA is Dead series. What they want to do here, these guys are all the same base beer. There's 4 beers in this series. We looked at the American Ale in the last video. This is the Bavarian Weizen. There's also the Pilsen Lager and the Belgian Trappist. And what they're doing with these beers is essentially starting with the same base beer. They're all designed essentially to show you exactly how a different yeast strain can influence the flavour of the beer. And all the beers in this series are made from the same base, like I say, and then they're fermented with the different yeast strains to give you the different styles of beers really. So all the beers have a blend of Centennial and Amarillo hops, and they've got a malt base of Paleo, Munich and Cara malts, and they're all 6.3%, but obviously different styles. So this guy is a German Hefeweizen style beer, 6.3%. So we'll just read out the blurb to you as we always do in this video. So it says here, they always have if you're watching one of my Brewdog reviews for the first time, they always have the little crazy blurbs on the side of these things, so have a read at your beer before you actually crack into it. But it says here, it's time you got to know the real foot soldiers of the revolution, yeast. Fighting from the depths of the fermentation tank, billions of these tiny, practically invisible cells are heroically laying down their lives to magically turn sugars into alcohol. But it doesn't stop there. From Belgian Trappist to Pilsen Lager, American Ale to Bavarian Weizen, yeast has the power to change the flavour, aroma and complexion of your beer in an instant. Cue Unleash the Yeast, a mega mini series of 4 beers brewed to the same ABV using a blend of Centennial and Amarillo hops and a backbone of Pale Ale, Munich and Cara malts, each created to worship a different yeast. Come and give these craft beer martyrs the recognition they finally deserve. So as I mentioned to you, a really cool little series from that. The first series of these guys came out in November 2013, and I think there will be a new series of them coming out in November 2014 as well. And the IPA is dead, like I mentioned to you. I think that's been going for perhaps 3 or 4 years. So these series, they are sort of renewing them every year. But I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little quick look at the bottle art. It's the standard sort of Brewdog splashed paint style of thing. As I've mentioned to you before, these ones are unusual because the bottle, if you like, usually the shield is up in one of the corners over here, so it's quite unusual that this is in the centre, but this is actually normal for their sort of beers that are in the 4-packs, if you like. Pardon me, but let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting. As I mentioned to you, it's a 6.3% German Hefeweizen. It's got a hop base, of Amarillo and Centennial hops, and it's got Pale Ale, Munich and Cara malt. So let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting here. And as I mentioned to you in the last video, actually, normally Brewdog are a very sort of hop-forward brewery. So it was quite interesting with the American Ale, because it was almost as if they tried to sort of tone it down to allow the yeast character to come out a little bit. They tried to sort of tone it down with the hops, which was really interesting. So it'll be interesting to see what this German Hefeweizen's like. So if I just bring up the light and let you have a nice little look at the colour of this one, as you can see, it's a really nice sort of bright orangey amber one. There's a solid finger or so of a frothy white head on there. There's some bigger bubbles in there too. I can see just a little bit of sedimentation coming down at the bottom, but that's quite common actually for German Hefeweizen beers. This one's actually, the colour's usually about normal for the German Hefeweizens as well. And obviously I lived in Germany for a couple of months when I was on exchange there, so I've got a good idea of how this style kind of should be. So this should be a really interesting one for us to have a look at. But there's just a little bit of carbonation actually going up to the top there. Usually these beers do have just a little bit of carbonation that kind of helps bring out the sort of pardon me, the sort of fruity acidity that you get in these beers. But let's give it a shuggle and just see how we get on with the aroma here. Pardon me, sorry. It actually is, in my opinion, it's actually quite mild for a Hefeweizen in comparison with the German ones. But it does have the elements of that typical sort of Naturtrüb, unfiltered Hefeweizen that you expect from Germany. But you've got a nice little bit of the bready and yeasty character that you would always expect in there. A little bit of the kind of banana, the sort of banana notes, a small bit as well of the sort of clove spice that you expect from these two. And there's just a little bit of a kind of, perhaps citric fruit actually. But yeah, just a little bit of kind of citric fruit. It's actually quite mild compared to some of the German Hefeweizens that I've kind of been exposed to in Germany, but it's got all the elements that you would expect of it. The nice banana and cloves, the bready yeasty character, and just a little bit of spice from the sort of clove leaves as well. So it's quite an interesting one. So let's dive into this and see how we get on. I don't actually think I've ever tried a Hefeweizen style beer from Brewdog, so this one should be really interesting. It's actually very different, and on first taste, very different actually from the Hefeweizens you'll get in Bavaria. The thing with this one is, it does seem to have all the elements that you expect from it, but they're just not quite pronounced in the way you would expect. But yeah, it's actually quite spicy. There's a lot of clove spice in there. And you're getting just the nice sort of banana flavours that are mixing with that. But this one is actually quite spicy compared to the German Hefeweizens that I've had. But you're getting a nice mix of the banana and sort of bready malts and yeasty character just coming out in the middle there. But yeah, the thing that's interesting here, and I think maybe they've done the same as they did with the American ale, they've toned it down a little bit so you can perhaps notice more of that malt base in the middle of the beer. Because the thing with this is, it's not quite as sharp, it doesn't have that kind of acidity that you normally expect from the German Hefeweizens. And I think they did the same with the American Pale Ale. They wanted you to get a bit more of that kind of bready and yeasty character that comes out in the middle of the beer. But yeah, I would definitely agree with that. On the opening, the underlying note of this beer is that it is actually quite a bit of spice, and that will come to you. That's a lot of the yeast that does that work, I've found. But you're getting nice, in the middle of this beer, you've got a quite nice and mild, quite bready, yeasty character with just a little bit of that banana flavour kind of sitting in the middle of it, and it's blended really well together actually. But yeah, it's got just a little hint of the acidity that you expect from the Hefeweizens. Normally you get a little bit more of it in the Dunkelweizens, but this one's actually going for more of a sort of Naturtrube, an unfiltered Hefeweizen. But I can see what they're trying to do here. As they said in the series, the idea is to get the feel of how the different yeasts affect the beer, and I do think they're actually doing that quite well by toning down certain elements of the beer. But yeah, like I say, opens up with that nice little bit of spicy character. You move into the middle of the beer and you're starting to get a good mix of the white and yeasty banana bread in there, and it blends really well together actually. On the finish, you're getting just a little bit of kind of citric and grassy character kind of coming out, but the underlying spice character that's coming from the clove leaves is what is really sitting prominent in this beer. It's just sitting there nice in the middle of the tongue actually, and in the back of the tongue, and just on the sort of front part, that's when you're starting to get the yeasty character just sitting in there. It's very, very nice actually. It's well done for what they're aiming to do to get you to taste the different yeast strains. In comparison to an actual German Hefeweizen, it is quite toned down, but that's just my opinion. You might think differently of the beer, but I do like it. It's well done for what they're aiming to do. But in terms of the mouthfeel, they've got the mouthfeel bang on, I think. It's mid-bodied, it's quite highly carbonated, and just a little bit dry on the finish actually, and there's not so much in the way of bitterness with it. Maybe just a slightly little bit oily as well, but it's not quite as full-bodied as the normal German Hefeweizens. So what I would say to you with this beer, and I do like it, don't get me wrong on this, they've done exactly what they've set out to do. They want to give you a German Hefeweizen so you can see exactly what this yeast character does, but in comparison with what you'll actually get in Germany, it is quite different. It's not quite as pronounced in certain flavours, and it is sort of, I would say it's just not quite as filling as a Hefeweizen. Normally, I could drink this Hefeweizen pretty easily, but some of the stuff you'll get off the taps in Germany, you know, it'd take me about an hour to drink a half litre of these things, but you know, I could probably drink this beer very, very easily, I would say. So overall, I would say they've managed. I would say it's quite good, and I do like the flavour of this beer. In comparison with a German Hefeweizen, it's not quite there, but for what they're aiming to do, to show you exactly how the yeast can influence the beer, they've got it bang on. So it's an interesting Hefeweizen. I would recommend that you try it, and as always, please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on these beers, because it is interesting to hear what other people think of the beer, and just so I don't feel like I'm sitting up here and talking rubbish. But I would recommend that you try the beers in the Unleash the Yeast series, and I will be interested to try the next series of these that comes out, because they always seem to do some really quite nice beers in these IPAs Dead and the Unleash the Yeast series so far. I look forward to trying the Trappist and the Pilsen Lager as well. So stay tuned to the channel if you want to see those beer reviews. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'm not sitting up here and talking rubbish, but thanks again for watching my beer reviews. If you want to see more Brewdog beer reviews, subscribe to the channel, and as always, like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff, and I will catch you soon with another beer review. Cheers.